I was supposed to give a salon type of lecture, concept of sublime and what is genius, what makes art elevate to something that you could call genius, as opposed to, and he gives a lot of examples like Homer's writing and various things like that. Nothing moves you. There's no concept of moving. I'm not Roger Scruton. My conversation doesn't stray too far from women. You know what I mean? Like it's steeped in the same kind of pedigree, or the same kind of like basic, coming out of the Western axial thought, of philosophy, I hope, or I'm trying to reach into that bag and pull out some ideas out of that. But it's still, and I'm wrapped around the idea of women and men and relationships and polarity and this kind of stuff, more than maybe Roger Scruton is more concerned with art and ethics and this kind of stuff, right?
Well, welcome back to the podcast. We're back to our regular programming. I hope you like the 4-part training that we put out recently, and we'll link to that just below. Another thing we did last week was the Salon Amorata, a real new turn for us to bring the kind of salon energy online. We had about 45 people join us for a conversation about turning your life into art. And for a limited time, we're going to put that link close to the episode. So if you want to catch up on a 2-hour live salon interactive with a lot of the other podcast listeners, that's going to be floating around this episode, and you can find that. Sana, I wanted to just check in with a couple of things. Later, I think we'll speak about the Guild, but you mentioned that you've just been in Oxford, which is my hometown, for the last week. And you also mentioned that you had been invited to speak. This, I guess, message of beauty that you've been building online with us, with our this audience on this corner of the internet, which you've been doing for years. But you were invited by an academic foundation to give a particular kind of lecture. I'm quite curious who this other audience is that you're sharing the message to.
It's called the Pharos Foundation, and these guys are fantastic. They're smart, brilliant, highly articulate and educated couple of young guys that started this foundation, and it basically sprung up around after the death of Roger Scruton. It's a kind of a tribute and memorial to his legacy. And they started what they called the Roger Scruton lecture series, and they've changed it now to the Oakshot lecture series. And so they have these series of lectures, and they're based in Oxford, and they bring in these interesting people from around the world to do. The one I just went to on Wednesday is a woman called Margaret Macmillan. Margaret Macmillan? Yeah. And she's a member of the Order of Canada. She's a member of high orders in Britain. She was an Oxford Canadian scholar. She's written a bunch of books, and she's very interesting, a very lovely lady. I talked to her quite a bit at the dinner afterwards. So I was supposed to give a salon type of lecture, a smallerish type of thing, but it didn't materialize. And the subject, which is interesting to me, is the subject of the Sublime, which has been contrasted or aligned with the concept of beauty for the last 300-400 years. The Romantics took off with it. The philosophers like Burke and Kant, they kind of expanded on it, but it is a treatise by Longinus in approximately 100 AD, where he talked about the concept of sublime and what is genius, what makes art elevate to something that you could call genius, as opposed to, and he gives a lot of examples like Homer's writing and various things like that. So it's just a concept that I've been very interested in. And I was supposed to give a kind of a mini lecture or salon conversation about the concept of the sublime, which is my own uneducated, kind of like take on it. But it didn't materialize because of various logistics things. So I went there anyway, I knew it wasn't going to happen, or I had a strong suspicion it wasn't going to happen. But there's plans of work for it to happen in the future. So, but for me to go to Oxford, am I answering the question? Am I off track here?
No, it's great. Keep going.
For me to go to Oxford is really my own legacy and tribute and ceremonial nod to Roger Scruton, who I've really impressed me in life. You know, like he's one of the few people that affected me. I guess you could say that. I would say one of the few people that I would say that was a mentor or a teacher to me, somebody that I looked up to try and understand the intricacies of his mind and his thought, which just fascinate me. He wrote 50 books. I just, yeah, there's something about his work and what he tried to capture that is what I aspire to in some directional way, you know. So me going to Oxford, and I go to these dinners after the lecture, and the dinners are well met, hail fellow, and you know, like they're raise the glass and stuff like that. And I'm meeting some interesting people there. Like I was sitting next to a woman who's in her 60s, and she was a war correspondent for years, very famous one. And her husband was sitting on another part of the table, and he's a very famous war correspondent. And I talked with her at length, and it's just and the person on my left is an ecclesiastical scholar or a scholar um, on sacred spaces in the Hebrew Bible, and you know, and so it's fascinating to me. Like I don't get these kind of conversations with anybody, you know. And you know what I realized? Because most of the people that I'm hanging out with when I go to Oxford and go to these dinners are more elderly, I guess you could say, and they've seen some things and they've done some things, and like I, I became friends with one of the premier lawyers of England, and I became friends with one of the premier architects of the world just by being there and hanging out with these people. There's some young people too. I shouldn't say that, but what I realized that I haven't had since my early days is that fellowship with the man that influenced me a lot was Bill. When I was writing my book, and you know, Bill was my 90-year-old neighbor that really had the casting of the spirit, and I don't have kind of gathering with me. Your noise, you.
Yep. It's not on my end. I'm playing still, hoping that it's going to go away, or someone will be able to snip it out.
Yeah, I don't have that. You know, that I have lots of conversation with men, but elderly men who've seen some things, and at the end of their days, and they have some reflections. I don't have anybody to talk to like that, I really like that. You know, that kind of discourse. So that's why I keep going to Oxford. They invite me to say,
That's the
okay,
pull. There's a sense of community and conversation there that
the
continues to,
the
I guess, challenge and nourish.
what Longinus called the elevated thinking, thinking like we're all of the earth, and nobody's profound or sacred or anything like that. We all have dirty thoughts. We all have like broken thoughts and insecurities of that. But there's a class of people, or class is the wrong word, but you know what I mean. There's a type of person who is just as lost as any of us, but he's trying to think of something like this guy, this scholar on the biblical spaces. I think it's fascinating. He's not just trying to be a normal guy working a normal job. He's trying to head down this path of of learning, and some people may say, well, that's stuffy and boring. But you know, I mean, Oxford was the place where Tolkien and C.S. Lewis would walk around in the parks together and challenge each other. They created their works of art because they were hanging out with each other in the pubs. You know,
Yeah,
so
the salon
um,
scene.
the salon scene.
I,
So I just it's
the
close to my heart to go there because I don't have that discourse at all, and I want to look. I want to sit in the company of people who have who can say things that just completely just overwhelm me. Like I never thought of that before.
Yeah.
That's what I want. Yeah.
the selfish question that I want to ask and understand, based on your little introduction, is you mentioned about genius, that some art could elevate itself and achieve. I don't know if that's the right word, but connect with or stem from or tap into something that's genius, that is of a realm, a sublime realm. Um, what's the difference? How does that happen?
Well,
Based on the yeah.
Longinus was the only one in history that wrote anything about this, about the sublime or the concept of genius. I mean, Plato and Aristotle and poetics and stuff like that, they kind of approach it, but it was more rhetoric. In other words, what arrangement of words is elevated compared to what, you know, or what is that is something heroic or epic. And what Longinus tried to talk about is this concept that the sublime is, which you detect in certain things, in writing, in art, in music, is something that moves you and elevates you. And which is where the genius comes from. And he said basically that genius, you can train technically, and people know this, you can train technically as a musician, but you don't have feel. There's something that isn't quote unquote genius in your fingertips where you're playing the piano, but it's technically perfect. And we talk about technical art, and people say, well, it's brilliantly done, but there's no feeling. Nothing moves you. There's no concept of moving. And so Longinus talked about this, which fascinates me, and which is what I'm trying to understand and capture in my own understanding. And I would never say that my writing approach is the sublime, because I break a lot of the rules that Longinus said, like want simplicity and clarity of thought, and I'm all over the place, ornamentation in my writing, but I like it. It's something I like to read. But then, the problem was Longinus was just basically disappeared, and nobody else commented on in the ancient times at all, commented on him or his work or anything until about the 1600s, and then the French and the Germans and the English discovered him again in their neoclassical pursuit of anything Roman and Roman and Greece. And they discovered his work again, and they translated it to French, first by a guy named Boileau, and then translated to English. And all these Englishmen that went on the grand tour, the royal tour, they would leave England and they head down to Italy and stuff like that and do a tour of Europe. And it was a big thing for the men to do. Created the Romantic poets, Byron and Shelley and all that. They all went on a grand tour. And Wordsworth and all these guys. And they went along and they said, well, there's one paragraph in Longinus' tract where he talked about the idea that something that is infinite, the thought of the infinite can overwhelm your mind because we just can't grasp it. And it's awe-inspiring and makes one, kind of like be small and still. And these crazy guys, they took this concept from that paragraph and they said, well, the sublime, what we interpret the sublime to mean is something terrible, something that scares the hell out of you, but you're safe from it. So it's pleasures, like a horror movie or seeing a storm out there, but it's not, you're safe in your house. They called the sublime this connect, and Burke picked it up. Edmund Burke, the great conservative philosopher. And I'm thinking, why would you subvert the concept of sublime, which is something that moves you and elevates you closer to something divine, to something that scares the shit out of you? And Burke just, Boileau and Addison, they first mentioned this, and Burke picked it up. And then Immanuel Kant, who never left Germany, bless his heart, he picked it up from those guys, and he wrote on it as well. And so now everybody thinks the sublime is something that's horrific and overwhelming and scary at the same time. So I'm trying to reclaim that, and then my talk is going to be about that.
Reclaim the sublime as something that's not terrifying and overwhelming and scary.
Because we don't have that. Like like Burke would say, and I think Immanuel Kant would say that there's three levels. I think Kant said this. There's the scary sublime, there's the beautiful, and then there's the sentimental. And he gave examples, or not him, but I think I can't remember who it was, Addison or something. So he gave examples of sheep on a hill. They please us. We look at it, and a creek running by us. He said that's what beauty is. That's beauty because it pleases us. And I'm saying no, that isn't beauty. That's just we look at it, we nod our head, and we look away. It doesn't stop us in our tracks and move us. And beauty has a quality of moving us. And the sublime is the way. So sublime portion of beauty is what carries us, moves us. It's the mechanism that you. That's my thinking, and everything I've read about it and thinking about it, talking about it. I can't disagree with that. This is where I want to understand. I want to move into that direction and have this conversation with myself, I guess, of sublimity. And I think that the word has been stolen, and I use that word on purpose. It has been absconded by these great philosophers who are greater than me. But use a different word. Use awe. Use, God fearing. You don't need to steal that word sublime, which had very specific. Longinus's thing was, and he was talking about writing a lot. How certain writing elevates your thinking, and you can't have elevated writing without elevated conversation with yourself. And we don't have a word for that, and now they stole it. So the sublime is something. Yeah.
I should read some Longinus so I really understand where you're coming from with this. I would love to hear from you, and this is probably putting you on the spot at this time in the morning, but fragments, like comparable sentences or paragraphs where this sentence or this paragraph achieves sublimity in the quality of its thought and in its expression, versus a sentence that wants to do a similar thing, but we would say it's prosaic. And what exactly are the rules? Because the thing about putting aesthetic rules on a paragraph and just saying this is sublime because of these rules that we deduce, then you're going to get the copycat who applies all those rules, but then they create something prosaic because it doesn't contain the thing in the midst of the writing that moved you, right? They copied the form, but weren't able to.
That's right. That's what he says.
Repeat the transmission that somehow is encoded in some kind of blank space.
He mentioned that there's 5 different styles that make up the sublime in writing. And for example, the word order is very important, the way the words flow. Okay. And then he used things called devices, which are like metaphors, this kind of thing that, and so you have to go with judgments of taste to talk about this kind of thing. But like my writing is really over ornamentated and overwritten, and I know this, and I can't clean it down at all. I just can't do it because I wouldn't want to read it. I write something that I would like to read, and I could get accused of that, and I would accept that my stuff leans toward the look at me sentimental, look at instead of alluding to somebody crying, you describe it all. He's crying and showing my tears. Look at me, how sad I am. Because, like sentimental, Albert dies and look how sad I am. Look at me crying. And, they do that in movies. I just saw the movie Nuremberg, which is a new one with Russell Crowe. And he's playing Goering, and it's a terrible movie, and all the critics liked it. But to me, it's a terrible movie because there's a scene there where all these in the Nuremberg courtroom, where all these lawyers and military people and high up people and stuff like that, and they show some footage of the concentration camps, Auschwitz and Dachau and stuff like that, which is horrible. The black and white, the bulldozer moving the bodies and stuff like that. And it would show a black and white scene, and then would zoom over to the head lawyer, and the lawyer's sitting, I guess, with a tear in his eye. And then black and white again, and a zoom over to another corporal, and the corporal's sitting there, his eyes are all misty, and he did about 5, 6 different people like that, one at a time, alternating, that were all misty-eyed and teary-eyed to show how terrible it was. It's that
Yeah.
sentimental, because a lawyer, I'm certain not all of those people had tears in their eyes. One lawyer would be, you know, be moved, but be stony faced, you know. But they want to show how terrible it is, and they want you. It just terribly kitsch in the art,
That's right, and manipulative. Yeah, because
manipulative.
often the films that move people the most is when the remains of the day. Have you seen that with Anthony Hopkins? It's
Yeah,
basically an English butler from the period of, the
yeah, I
ultimate
did see
period of
that. Yeah.
stiff upper lip, right? So this is a person who cannot cry because he holds his upper lip so stiffly. There's no way he's ever going to let down the fortress of his own face and his own sense of duty. And it's
Yes.
moving because he cannot express what he's actually feeling. Then you as a viewer actually feel more what is feeling. So my
Right.
hunch would be, if you didn't allow these lawyers to actually cry and they were all stoic, which they probably were in the 50s or the late 40s, I
Right.
imagine they're not getting misty-eyed actually in the
Especially the
courtroom.
professional environment
Yeah,
where people are looking at them, right?
yeah.
For certain.
Then the audience feels it more.
Yeah, and you see, I mean, you see it in things like Saving Private Ryan, and the bookended old man scene where he's running through the graveyard at the very beginning. He's an old man running through the graveyard looking for his fallen companions' graves, and he's bubbling and stumbling and weeping and blah, 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 blah. And it's just it's an artifice. It's like it's trying to tell you this is how you should feel about this now, people. It's a club over the head. Roger Scruton talked about it. Um, the idea of Milan Kundera talked about kitsch and how it's artificially set up to try and make you feel something sentimental.
Mm.
So when those guys talked about the beautiful is the sheep on the hill and stuff like that, a painting that's the sheep on the hill or a duck on a pond, we all look at it and go, "Oh, that's so beautiful, that's so wonderful," but it's not true beauty. It's just exists. It's charming. We like it. It's soft. It doesn't challenge us in any way. Doesn't make us think. Doesn't make us wonder about our existence on Earth. It just makes a couple ducks on a pond and somebody articulated the feathers really nicely, you know. And we're pleased and we move on. That's the same thing as all the Facebook quotes and updates and all this kind of stuff. It's pleasant, but it doesn't capture you in some way. And beauty has a quality of capturing you, and the sublime is the way that you're moved. The way music moves through you. Music moves, and no one knows how music moves. As a C note moves to an F note, we would say that there's a movement there, but nobody knows what does that mean. Like, how does it move? And knowing how does it move in our consciousness, in our psyche? We can tell, we can all say that it's moving from here to here, that music is moving, but it doesn't really. And so music moves, and it also moves through us and moves us. And that's what I'm talking about with the sublime. It's like so Longinus talked about these rules of style, and but it's hard to pin down, because one person might say this is really sublime, this sentence. The person might go, okay, well, I read it, I don't get it. But these thinkers, the Burkeans and the Kantians, would say that because some people just don't have the discernment of taste. They don't have it in their psyche or their makeup or their intelligence or something. And so it takes a qualified mind to say that this is sublime. It takes a sublime oriented mind. And some people are just not sublime oriented and they will never see it. That's what some of these people said. I don't know. It's just a
Okay.
fascinating subject.
So my personal request at some point, I would love to see a list of Zan's top 10 sentences, writing that carries something sublime
Oh,
and creates.
I have senses like that just like stop me in my tracks. Not that my own
that
writing, but that I've read.
that have you captured them, or put them in a
Oh yeah.
notebook or something like that?
Well,
Okay.
I underline every book that I read, and I underline a lot, and take little notes in the you know. And sometimes I don't write it down in special notes, but I write my own thoughts. Like if something's inspired me and I come up with my own phrase or something, I'll write it in a note so I can remember to try and think about it if I'm writing.
Mm.
But I'm very careful that I don't steal anything from anybody, man. I would a phrase or sentence for some reason it bothers me. I'm very careful, but I would love to
Yeah.
have written it. There's some things that I wish I could
Yeah.
put in my book. Damn, it's so well said, but I can't.
But yeah, we have to go fishing for our own ones, right? The sentences that you write that you think are nothing as good as like Nabokov or any of your great mentors. Someone
No,
else is reading that in your book and thinking, wow, Zan said the best thing ever. I wish I could write like him, and so on. That will be passed
actually,
down.
Nabokov is a good example because his writing is very florid, very uh, curly-cued, and this kind of thing. And but it's clear and clean and beautiful, and no one would ever say, "Oh, it's overwritten." Well, maybe somebody would, but and I would aspire to that kind of writing, but I know that I don't have that. And English was not his first language. You know, he wrote in Russian first, and he's a better writer in English than all the other writers. So, and then Virginia
Well,
Woolf, and the way her stream of consciousness and James Joyce and stuff.
well,
Yeah.
here's the question, because I want to connect this back to the whole theme of the podcast. I received a few messages after our salon on Sunday, and people
Okay.
were asking, hey, this is so philosophical, and I like it and I get it and so on, but I want to connect it back to women and the beauty of women, which is the reason that I'm here in the first place.
Which is this
So
podcast.
my question to you is, okay, so this decade of your life, the whole philosophical sense of existence that you're trying to articulate for yourself, how I'm kind of assuming this opened up somehow through women or through your journey in relationships and the pursuit of women. I imagine that this sense of taste, beauty, the sublime, opened or was
Yeah.
strongly developed through your intimate life, and I'm curious how that took shape.
Yeah, that's a good question. Like, I've always been heading down this path since I was very young to try and understand women. So how has it evolved into something else, or has it always been an under layer in my thinking? I I don't see a distinction, to be honest. I think that my abiding affection for the feminine spirit and the idea of the feminine spirit is really in lockstep in line with my idea of the sublime and beauty. Why? And there's a lot of men out there say, "Well, I've never seen beauty in women. They're all evil and conniving," which I get. There's we're all human, right? And there's a lot of layers of society that you know override all
and
anything.
and other men who would say, actually, yeah, it's the kind of grassy mound with a sheep on it and the way that the sunlight hits that configuration in nature, that's beauty. A woman, that's your lust, Zan, actually. And
Yes, that's
anyone can look beautiful in a state of lust when you're clouded.
but we're also, again, I want to make a distinction about this. When you mention beauty, if you look it up anywhere, it it equates automatically in this modern age to beauty products, beauty, body culture, the way we look. So beauty, like even there's not even a category for beauty in when I'm trying to categorize my book in Amazon. Just pick a category for it. There's no concept of the philosophical sense of beauty. It's just beauty means beauty products. And everybody's mind goes there immediately. Beauty's been trivialized to just the appearances and the way things are set up. But I'm harking back to the transcendental concepts that the Greeks explored and the Romans borrowed of these universals. And this is pre-Christian. So we think morality is based on religion or Christianity. And if you're secular, the secular age, you can't have proper morality because why not kill somebody? You know, like there's no governing law or God that says you can't do it. And so there's been a huge attempt to try and come up with morality in a atheistic, secular way. But the Greeks and the Romans were pagan. They weren't Christian. They had pagan religions, pagan gods, and they still theorized heavily on morality and ethics, you know, and man's service to man, what it all means, and you know, this kind of thing. So, but their transcendentals, like the basic ones, were truth, goodness, and beauty, and as being high ideals. Plato's forms the highest ideals, you know, and now we've kind of erased that as necessary in some way. Certainly, beauty is thought of just as, and modern thinkers are saying this too. Beauty is just the way something makes you feel. So it's subjective. So like beauty is in the eye of the beholder. So I see this girl over here. She's very beautiful to me, and I see this sheep on the hill, and they're very beautiful to me. But it might not be beautiful to Jordan. It might be a completely different thing. So it's subjective. And my whole underlying half-informed thesis is that beauty is a real physical thing that exists independent of us. We either aligned with it or not. I mean, if you want me to wax philosophical, but this is trying to line it back up to women, and let me try and close that loop.
Yeah,
because the idea that I think we're either aligned with beauty in our life, and or we're not. And when we're not aligned with it, we feel the angst and the years flying by. And am I wasting my life? And am I doing the right career? And am I in this relationship that's good or not? And when we're not aligned with beauty, we feel the discord. And that's how I think. Beauty is a field. It's a vibrational field in my mind. And ugliness is just the absence of beauty. It doesn't exist. It's just beauty, in terms of beauty or not beauty, okay? Layered over top of things or of life. And so, I mean, to say all that, and then to have a relationship that matches the Longinus version of the Sublime, which is elevated thinking and wanting to look upward towards something. You know, sublime means subliminal, means up to the threshold, wanting to look to above the normal. That's what it is. It's wanting to have an experience and eyes that are looking and experiencing above the normal. And so when I had my corporate job and insecurity and all that kind of stuff, I felt that I wasn't manifesting my own personal desire for adventure, mythic path through life. And other people in the same type of job might not experience that. They might not have that burning in them, but I did, which felt to me meant I wasn't aligned with what is beautiful and what is lovely, you know, not sentimental, but something that's capturing and moving and drives you forward. And so my whole experience with women was like that. It was like basic. And this critic that you're talking about, this anonymous critic, might say, well, it's just lust and it's just horniness. Yeah. And that's 100% a layer there for certain. And maybe at a point in time, it was just that, where any woman's interchangeable. I think this thing about porn, you could exchange any woman with any other woman that's roughly the same body shape, and you're okay. You know, it's exchangeable body parts. But back in the day, I would say that, man, I just wanted some girl. I wanted a girlfriend that was pretty, that made me proud, that, that was quote unquote out of my league. And so I would head down that path of falling for the next available girl until she got tired of me. And then the next one, cast all my hopes and dreams onto the next one. And so you could definitely say that that was a kitschy way of looking at life, and sentimental, and how does it make me feel, and etc.
Beauty was instrumental to you having a self-esteem boost, or to be able to feel good in the eyes of others because you had some woman on your arm.
Surface beauty idea that she looks good. Didn't really care about the personality. And a lot of guys can understand this. You might get tired of her because her personality is grating, or she's not a nice person. But men will put up with a lot, if she's good in bed and she's pretty, a hell of a lot. And until he gets tired of it and worn out. At least I did back in my early days. Now you look for something behind the eyes, like women do, So I don't know, to return it back to this, there's a sublimity in the way you're trying to have an elevated conversation with yourself, an elevated conversation with the world, with God, with the one you're in relationship with. You want to know this. And like I said, we're all broken. We all sin. We all make mistakes, and we all have bad days, and we all have insecurities, and we all have doubts, and maybe some depressive type of feelings at times in life. But then the idea is that you, in relationship or not in relationship, the idea is to consciously try and say, okay, well, what saves you from these little idiosyncrasies is gratitude, and recognizing that, there's certain things that could be different about you today. You have your health maybe, and you could not have your health. And it could be taken away, but it isn't. So you still have that. And just the gratitude changes your relationships, because you have this beauty in your life today. You might think, well, I want something. I haven't explored my young wild oats yet, and I should be, but I'm in this great relationship. But I don't know what to do. There's a conversation that has to happen, and the communication that has to happen, and a real honest conversation with yourself that you bring to her in a loving, curious way, as opposed to, hey, we need to have a talk. I'm saying a whole bunch of stuff here, trying to tie in this concept.
I can ask a question to bring this home, if you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've read it on enough.
If you would like, yeah, because I'm sat here thinking, God, like I am the average guy just sitting around and thinking, how does this connect with me? I date some girls. They're not very nice. The sex has been good, and it's certainly better than being alone. But I'm running around in circles because they give me all this, the psychological games and the cat and mouse and the judgment and the gossip and the just closedness of attitude. And I'm sick of the whole thing, and I just long for a kind of beauty that you're talking about. I imagine at some point the beauty becomes apparent. You see it like through the eye of some needle. It's like, what? Like there. I imagine there was a moment that showed you that it was possible, or maybe it changed something in your own psyche, because, like you were saying, you would have put up with a lot of disrespectful behavior to have a hot girl in your bed.
Yeah.
And then at some point, it sounds like you didn't do that anymore, either because you got sick of the disrespectful behavior and the kind of absence of beauty that was happening in those encounters, or because through some grace, women came along who embodied beauty to such an extent that it drew a new reality for you.
Yes. Yeah.
So either the women you were coming into your life changed, or something changed in your own mind that shifted what you were able to see.
Yeah, it sounds a little bit, and I certainly don't want it to be, but it sounds a little bit like I've become a rarefied thinker, or elevated in my thinking, or that I've transcended something. And it's not like that at all. I'm just a guy and I still feel like I'm just a guy. I've just really been thinking about this a lot and wanting to know. I want to ascribe to Sublime. I want my writing to be sublime. I would, I aspire to it, and I don't know. Maybe not other. Maybe others don't have that burning in them. I don't know, to a degree, but I think our listeners all do. So it's not like I've turned some corner and now I'm only look for the great, beautiful, lovely personalities in women. You know, I'm still a guy. You know, girls looking hot over there. That's good for me. I don't know what it means. All I know is that everything I'm trying to write about and capture, like the reason my second book has taken me so long is because I'm writing this practical book for men in my mind, and I'm trying to capture something that elevates it. I want it to be elevated to me. I wanted to think I said something really plain and really practical and really simple and really maybe kind of dirty, but it's couched in a certain way that elevates me as I read back again. I think, yeah, that makes me feel like I'm moved towards something. Moved makes me look up, as it says in Psalms. You know, makes me look up. I want to look up, and I want my writing to make me read and then want to look up to something beyond. You know, subliminal. And so, because I could bang out this book, man, I've got most of it kind of banged out already, but I'm trying to make the writing have this quality to me that makes me feel small against it in some way. And I don't know if I can pull it off, but I'm trying. And there's parts of it that I just adore, and other parts I think this is terrible. So I go back and massage and massage and massage and massage, and I think, okay, it's good. And then 3 days later, look again. Wait a minute. So my perfectionism is killing me. My perfectionism is trying to make something that isn't sentimental and obvious and treacly and sheep's on a hill that everybody nods and goes, that's charming. And also, I'm not trying to make my work sublime, but I'm trying to make it so that it moves me. And my audience is me. For certain, my audience is me. I'm not writing something that will be popular or well accepted, or I don't have that kind of thinking in mind that I want it to be well received. I want it to be well received, but if I lose that because I wrote something that captures my small little mind, I'm okay. I'm okay with it. If it gets slammed, so I'm very introspective today, as you can tell.
Yeah. You, I, I wanted to say, I gave your book to my aunt at some point, and she read 2 pages and put it down and said, "This guy doesn't get to the point."
Yeah, exactly.
It's
I've
just
heard
going
that.
round and round.
Yeah,
But this is someone who she wrote a few books actually that were murder, cannibal,
well, that's
killer,
cool.
serial killer, psychopath things. So she was like, "Look, if there's no knife or gun or teeth or abduction or car crash on page number one, it's too slow." So I mean, like, you're not going to please
A lot.
everyone.
There's a lot of people that have leveled that criticism against my book, The Alabaster Girl, and I'm okay with it. I I just couldn't. I couldn't adjust it in any way that makes it. You know, I couldn't clear. The writing is very over the top, but I kind of imagine my man on the train has a way of kind of like looking, winking at the world, this over the top, just kidding energy. You know, knowing that he's doing it. I have this character I created, man, and this is a character in my second book too. Not me. And I like that guy. I think he's cool. So I
So
imagine how he would see things.
I picked this up the other day, which is Nietzsche.
Oh, I have that. Yeah,
So it's
I
got a
haven't read it yet.
lovely painting.
Yeah.
And it was my birthday, so every birthday I go and pick up 2 or 3 books, just whatever's available. Our bookshop is small. This is Bali. We're
Right.
far away from any kind of publishing center. The Birth of Tragedy, which I think is a great, ironic thing to
Yeah,
get on your birthday. But
I
basically,
know.
it's still yeah. Usually, I buy a book about birth or death or something like that, just to make light of getting older. This is still in its shrink wrap, but what Nietzsche's doing here in this book is drawing a distinction between two central forces in art. It said the Apolline, representing beauty and order,
The Dionysian.
and the Dionysiac, a primal or ecstatic reaction to the sublime.
That's right.
So
Yeah.
I I thought of you and me actually and our respective proclivities or styles with writing and art, and I sense that we lived sharply on one side of that line or the other.
Wow.
What do you think? How do you identify with this idea of the Apolline or the Dionysiac in your work or in your taste?
Well, I don't. I understand he's pulling back to the Greek rhetoricians and the way their stylings stuff like that, but I don't know completely what he said, so I don't really have a comment on how he defined those two different styles. That's all. But tell me when
Yeah,
you read it.
yeah, we'll have to go further into the book. I sense like with that there is in
But
your
Nietzsche
writing
leaned
or
into
in
the idea of the sublime being something that is so, is overwhelmingly containing scary horror elements, but pleasurable at the same time.
primal or ecstatic reaction.
Yeah,
Yeah.
everybody in the last 300 years has used that, and I'm like, wait a minute. So that's my quarrel with them, but
Hmm.
ignore me.
We'll go into this more in a future date, but I sense in your
Okay.
writing you'd love to, as you say, you're looking up and you'd love to have everything well ordered, beautifully ordered in its right place, so that there is a symphony and a euphony in the language, that everything feels just and whole and gives that sense of, it's well said. I can relax because it was orderly, orderly in the way that it's stated and been represented. And
It's like
I kind
it's really poetry to me. Like my prose is it feels like poetry. I'm trying to write it like a poet because that's how I hear it. It's prose and poetic feel in my mind, even though it doesn't have meter and rhyme and stuff like that. It's tough. Like Beckett, he was writing all ornamental, flowery when he was younger, and then he just cleaned it down to this basic bare bones, in his later writing. He's writing in French a lot, but he wrote it down to the basic, just sentences, you know, later in life. And maybe that'll be me. I'm not there yet. I'm very immature as a writer. I haven't found my voice, maybe.
hmm, interesting to hear you say. Let's take a few minutes at the end because you said kind of in midweek that you wanted to say a few things about your time with Roger Scruton and particularly the Guild coming up and the way that you learned and the atmosphere in which you learned. You said for so many years you didn't have a mentor, and then this figure comes along, this philosophical figure who really impressed you, and now you have this forum of different thinkers, different experts
Yeah.
in their own realms that you come together with. So what do you what is it that you want to give in the particularly the intensives and the live meetups that you're offering inside the guild?
Yeah. So the thing about Roger Scruton, like when I discovered his work after I wrote my book, and I just floored by the things he was talking about and writing about. And so I've had to go find him, as I told many times. And I went to his he started a sort of a summer school, called it a summer school, kind of like an away camp. And they did it in Ireland. His first one he did. And it was in Ireland. And 10 of us showed up. And we spent a week with Roger Scruton, with both weekends. And we would he would lecture for a couple hours in the morning, and then in the afternoon we would be on our own, wander the duck pond gardens or whatever, and then in the evening we would have dinner with him and have a glass of wine. So he would, and and a few of us of the 10 would be invited to go up to his room. He was staying in this Irish resort, but the value of that gathering was the evening time with him, not his lectures. His lectures were great, but you could get his lectures by reading his book or watching YouTube videos. And for me, it was like the small, quiet moments in the evening where we're having a glass of wine, we're sitting quietly, a few of us. This has been my inspiration for what we're trying to create with the guild. This idea of breaking bread with with mentors and friends and companions, which we don't have very much, especially since COVID, right? So I finished the book, The Alabaster Girl, and then I discovered Roger Scruton's work after I finished that and recognized that he was a scholar that had been writing and talking about the concept of beauty in the transcendental way for decades and wrote many books on it. And so I went there to England where he lived. Actually, I went to Ireland first because he did what he called he announced a summer school, and about 10 of us showed up to Ireland and spent a week with him, where he basically he would give a 2-hour lecture in the morning, and we'd be on our own devices in the afternoon. And in this country manor estate in Ireland, we're all stuck in the same place. There's nothing else around this country. And we'd walk and see the ducks in the afternoon or just whatever, just or stay in our room, take a nap. And in the evening, we get together and have dinner with him and a glass of wine. And a few of us of the 10, he would invite up to his room to have a glass of whiskey and just sit in the twinkling hours of the starry night and look out the window and have a laugh. And so we did this every evening. And the value of that discourse with him in Ireland, I remember the first day that I was actually sitting and he was giving a lecture, and I had tears in my eyes because I'd never been a student. I never sat with rows of students taking notes since I was 13 years old. And I just I really moved me because I'm sitting absorbing somebody teaching me something. And it was powerful for me. And I really, really respected and looked up to Roger Scruton. And so the lectures are great. The afternoons are fantastic. But the value of that time in Ireland was the evenings where we would sit and just tell some anecdotes and tell the story about that time. And I was just in awe of sitting, quote unquote, at the feet of someone who's seen some things and it has been a great thinker for many, many years on great subjects that I would like to know about. And I just thrilled me. So every year I went back. We went to England after that. 4 or 5 times, 6 times, 7 times I went back to his farm in the Cotswolds, or with the same format: lectures in the morning, some excursion in the afternoon, and then have a tinkling glass of wine and late night shenanigans with Roger Scruton and have a laugh. Somebody would bring a bottle of whiskey and hang out. And the gathering of being in the presence of him was what was the real value, because I could see his lectures on YouTube. I could read his books. I didn't need for him to repeat the same thing in the lecture, even though I, was moved to sit there as a student. But that wasn't the value of it. The value of it was to be around the energy of this man who's been thinking these things for a long time. And I thought that was very impressive. I want to be like him. So I guess that's that's the same kind of feel and energy when I go to Oxford and London to these events I go to that I'm invited to. I feel like I'm around people that are just have longer eyes. They're seeing further vistas, or they're aspiring to see further vistas. Not because I want to be caught up in that energy too. So this is what has prompted our conversation the last 3 or 4 years, you and I, and Serene for certain, and our action relative to establishing the Amorati Guild, which is the company of compadres in the same energy, looking forward to the same, looking up to the same kind of transcendental way of looking at life. And I want to be around that. Roger Scruton died. And so I don't have that anymore. I'd keep going back every year otherwise. But I'm approximating it by going to Oxford because I'm sitting in some major thinkers, with some major thinkers, and I want to be inspired with major thinkers because I wish I was a major thinker, and I don't have it, and so I keep wandering back there. And so the guild to me, especially the idea of these kind of like quasi retreats that I want to do at least for the next year, where we wander off to some obscure location or some city and just sit and steep in it. What does it mean to be in the city? What is the history and why are we here? Why did we come together? And why are we breaking bread together? Same thing I have with Roger Scruton. I want to engender and foster that type of communicative gathering, breaking bread together, and, it's like saddle up regulators, let's go. And so this is what I want to recreate, because that to me just had marvelous style and conviction and inspiration. I would come away from these meetings inspired to write, inspired to create, inspired to try and have a more dynamic way of thinking, Anyway, that's a long-winded way of saying that really is my inspiration for the guild. That's what I want to recreate, the same kind of energy. We'll do it for a year. Maybe it doesn't work out, but we're trying it.
Do you remember having particular themes or practices or subjects that you would take away with you from these talks, or was that like far secondary just to the feeling of being in the room? And
far secondary. There was it didn't have a salon type of feel in that there's a thematic thing like the formal salon, but it was very much a salon because you sit there and you look at his bookshelf, and when we'd go to his home, be 10 of us again, and there's his rooms were floor to ceiling books as far as you could see everywhere. He had an old piano in the middle, and someone would play the piano, and the violinists would come and play and give us a contralto would come and sing something for us, and we just had these great experiences at his home, sitting in his study where he wrote all his books, all gathered around. And so there wasn't a theme so much, but more somebody would pose a question, Roger, you said that blah, blah, blah. But the questions were advanced questions, I guess you could say, not questions like, I don't know, they just seemed like out of my league. I remember we were having a discussion on the breakdown of music and Adorno and in the 20s, how they tried to cubism music, and then John, what's his name? Can't remember his last name.
Cage.
His canto, John Cage, his canto of 4.5 minutes or whatever. It's just silence, right? Which is the deconstruction. It's like Klein's pure blue in painting, or the absolute black. Like paintings went from like picturesque portrait style down to pure black, or Kandinsky's lines. Rothko's just panels, and so we would have a long discussion about that, which is to Duchamp's urinal, urinal we say in America and Canada, but you Brits say urinal. So his urinal, which is like Roger Scruton said, it was a practical joke on the art world, and everybody took it seriously. And this art now with his copy, and he made it as a joke, So we would have discussions about stuff like that, which is fascinating to me. It's like spending time in the evening there was like reading a book that you're fascinated and interested in. So I want to recreate that if I can, the best I can. So I want to surround myself with more elevated minds. So whoever is listening to this and feels like you're part of this conversation, want to be part of this furtherance of this conversation, that's what I see the Guild as, is elevated minds coming together and like having a more elevated conversation, which I don't mean it to sound hoity-toity or elitist. I don't mean that at all. I just want to be inspired in my conversations because there's a lot of small talk. There's a lot of small talk. The whole internet is small talk, and so I want to just sit and steep in some different type of conversations. That's all.
The conversations that are looking upwards, to loop back to what you said earlier on. I
And talk
think
about, that's the whole point, right?
sorry.
And talk about girls.
Yeah.
Like
Well,
this is the thing that we
yeah.
know.
Well, that's my that's the next question, because a lot of people have been reaching out to me, particularly, and they might be watching this and wondering, what is the place of girls, women, relationships,
Yeah,
attraction, feeling stuck in the midst of all of that somehow? What is the place of that inside, your whiskey drinking, history of art,
yeah.
soiree?
It's all the same thing as I say again. I mean, my conversation never strays too. I'm not Roger Scruton. My conversation doesn't stray too far from women. You know what I mean? Like it's steeped in the same kind of um, pedigree, or the same kind of like basic, coming out of the Western axial thought, of philosophy. I hope, or I'm trying to reach into that bag and pull out some ideas out of that. But it's still, and I'm wrapped around the idea of women and men and relationships and polarity and this kind of stuff more than maybe Roger Scruton is more concerned with art and ethics and this kind of stuff, right? So I
Yeah.
have my own bent. I have my own approach to it all.
So do you prefer cubist women or chiaroscuro women, or just women as one sheath of black?
All black. No
Pure
personality.
essence, yeah.
Essence, yeah.
Just essence.
Klein blue, Perion blue.
Like that's the background you have behind you, I think, is a Perignon blue.
Yeah, there you go. That's right. That's true.
Oceanic feminine wisdom.
Right? Yeah, I don't know. Um, I want to unfold it as it goes and have the conversation as it goes, and I'm excited about it. And so far, the guys that have signed up, I'm powerfully inspired that they're going to be part of it. You
Well,
know,
can you share a little of that with me, because how we've set it up, just so people know. I mean, like the technical workings. When you click through to sign up to the guild, you're in a random sorting machine, and half the people are steered towards me, and half the people are steered towards you. So, or Zan. So, like, what I've spoken to a number, probably a dozen people in real depth about the guild. So have you. You've spoken to about a dozen people in depth about the guild. What are you taking from your conversations, and are there any central connecting themes between the men?
well, for certain, in my conversations with men, and we saw in our salon, online salon we did the other day, that the comments are men saying, "I'm at the stage of my life too. I want to have the same thing." So they're understanding what what we're trying to lean toward, what we're trying to accomplish, what we're trying to head toward. And you can see, I saw on that webinar, that salon we had, these men were nodding there and smiling and beaming away, because and I went for dinner with one of these guys that was on that podcast.
Mm-hmm.
Oxford. He happened to show up in Oxford, so I went for dinner with him on my last night there, and he was on fire for this. He's 57 years old, and he's like lived around the world and done some crazy creative things in his life, and he's on fire for this. He's starved for the same kind of conversation, and we had a lively conversation. And so this is a good omen, a good boding for the kind of quality of conversation that we're going to try and find, and still have a lot of fun and winking at the girls walking by. So yeah,
Super. We'll put information to the guild just below the video, and also the salon conversation is not going to be up permanently, but if you are watching this within the first few days of this going out, you'll be able to catch up with the salon recording, which I mean that was a superb, for me. That was a really amazing online meeting, and
yeah, it was
the
fun.
energy and the fire in the questions. I think the fire and clarity from you on that occasion was really riveting, and I think we we absolutely nailed the energy of where this is going in that online
Perfect.
salon.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think so too. I enjoyed it a lot. I'm ready for it. It feels like a new, fresh breath of air, new impetus to fight for something going forward and for something great for the world, how I see it. So it's good.
All right, let's leave it there. Thanks for tuning in.
Hey,
We'll be
thank
back
you.
with. I think we're going to be back with the nitty gritty of viewers' questions about this situation and that situation with the women of your lives in the next episode.
Thanks, Jordan.